So in this, what has become a essay series in itself, which I'm going to need to learn how to video edit format. But anyway, I've discussed so far chapters 1 and 2 of Hannah Arendt on revolution. So very quickly, chapter 1 discussed the distinction between the ancient and feudal ideas of revolution being an overthrow of one tyrant for either another tyrant or for the rightful king from a usurper, or for somebody more with a legitimate claim to the throne. The idea of the revolution being something to free the citizens to be able to be participants in government was revolutionary. And it was discussed about Hegel and Marx and how they introduced the idea that history wasn't cyclical, but was in fact a process, always undergoing change. In chapter 2, the dangers of Hegel and Marx were discussed, and the differences in the attitudes for why they didn't emerge in the same way in America and in France. Importantly, in America, Hannah at least argued there was not the same degree of poverty. And there was certainly not the same sort of longing for lack of poverty. I think that is in itself a bit of a subjective political statement from Hannah, because I would imagine that records would show that, at least in terms of absolute poverty, then it was still pretty hard for people in 17th, 18th century America. But the New World was very appealing for a reason. Anyway, the danger was discussed of the focus changing the question of what would come after the revolution, what would be the aim of the revolution, from a political one to free man to be a participant in government himself, to be free in a public sense, to being free in a sense of being freed from masters, to being liberated from oppression, from slavery would be the wrong word, because she completely agrees that slavery in the institutional sense was oppressive, but she completely disagrees with the claim that poverty is oppressive. She believed that poverty was a natural state of the human condition, and of just biological life, and that the necessity which came with it is inevitable, which is what makes driving a revolution in a state of poverty to be so dangerous. And it was discussed how in the American Revolution there was no focus on this, but in the French Revolution this became a central issue. The American Revolution chose to focus on only freeing man to be a participant in the public sphere, as it were, in government, in shaping constitution, in having say in public affairs, whereas in the French Revolution it was trying to resolve this question of this burning poverty and strife that the French people were facing, which, because of the emotional underpinnings of it, for example, the overindulgence in compassion from Rousseau's idea of a compassionate natural state of humanity pre-civilization, through to which Robespierre as the leader of the Jacobin Revolution, ran with, saying that is what made the revolution so dangerous. Not exactly the most succinct summary, sorry about that, but and in chapter 3, which is a little shorter, thankfully, because even though these, I'd say chapters, they're more like essays, they're like 40, 50 pages each. This one's got 30. Chapter 3, The Pursuit of Happiness, Hannah kind of comments on the subtle but incredibly important distinction between the earlier ideas of the direction of the American Revolution and the later ideas that actually came up in the Constitution. Central to this is the question of is the function of government for man to be free in a public sense, to have public freedom, or is it to have private welfare? Another way of saying this is which is more important, freedom or security? Thankfully, we can take a little trip down the attitudes of the founding fathers if you want, but we've already discussed a bit of these in chapter 2. The general gist of it, of course, with the founding fathers was that they would prefer to public freedom to private security. The reason for this is quite important. It's because despotism and monarchy never excluded, at least in principle, private welfare. A benevolent ruler, benevolent monarch or emperor would have a duty to look after the well-being of their subjects. When they didn't do that, they were considered a tyrant. So the revolutionary aspect was not fighting against a tyrant, as discussed in chapter 1, seeking to overthrow a tyrant and replace them with another benevolent ruler. It was for the people to actually have an individual right to say in public affairs. The French Revolution did not make this distinction, which is somewhat bizarre considering that they were both overthrowing kings, and in fact, France, it was felt more directly. It was indirect colonial rule from America, but in France, the kings were only several miles away, and they literally marched to Versailles. But anyway, there was the American War of Independence, which is a very direct conflict with the British Crown at the time. And I'm not gonna be a filthy limey and try and argue over that and just piss off all my American friends. But it's a curiosity, at least, why there was that distinction. In the French Revolution, they decided that security was more important. That is, the private welfare, or at least that public freedom and private welfare could both be met in the same way that poverty could be eliminated and people could be liberated from all oppressions. So, there's more that we could discuss with chapter 3. I might come back to this. Finishing questions, really, on each chapter to see how well you understood my summaries and just to get a discussion running. So, first of all, chapter 1. Do you think that history is a process? Do you agree with Hegel's claim, Hegel, whatever, that history is somewhat of a dialectic, or do you believe that it is more like a cycle, that we follow a rule from benevolent rulers and they gradually end up becoming more corrupt, and then there's going to be an overthrow, and then they're replaced by divine law or by some sort of law of nature by another benevolent ruler, and would just go around in this cycle of tyranny and security in a sense. Do you believe that history is a process? Is it a cycle? Is it a bit of both? That's chapter 1. Chapter 2, this is going to be hella controversial. Can we be completely freed from all necessities? Have we reached a state of post-scarcity? Have we reached a point where we can be, at least in a relative sense, freed from poverty? Related to this, what do you think is more of a problem when compassion turns into sentimentalism and then goes inward and becomes corrupted, or the absence of compassion and relying upon the purely kind of steel rationalist mindset? And then chapter 3, of course, would be, do you think that we can have both freedom and security? Can we have public freedom and private welfare? Do these things have to be in conflict? In what ways are these in conflict? And is our post-modern society actually managing to achieve that? Are we being given security or freedom? I have an opinion on this, which is that we're not really getting given much of both, because our governments are really not representing us very well. Although one could say maybe there is a bit more security than there is actual representation, which Arendt would say is a danger sign, by the way, of being in a totalitarian, fascist, communist kind of government. But don't really want to put words in your mouth. You might disagree. Might need to review these videos, but I've tried to break them up into little sound bites, and maybe can come back to read some quotes or something. But I hope you enjoyed it, and if you have any feedback, positive and negative, please keep the negative constructive. Like, I'm aware that I need to do video editing stuff, then comments below, and I will hopefully see you next time, maybe with the second half, who knows. All right, take care for now. Woo!